Do not adjust your sets. This is not a Vlogmas episode. This is your standard run-of-the-mill podcast, or at least as run-of-the-mill as I get in terms of outright ridiculousness. Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Knitting Vicariously podcast. My name is Caroline. I'm found more commonly across Instagram and Ravelry as dunderknit. I am a knitter living in London, and if this is your first time joining us here on the podcast, hello and welcome to you. A quick thing to note is that this is a swearing-friendly podcast, and therefore the language, rather like the yarns and the projects that I tend to show off, can get a little bit colourful. Just a word of warning for you. However, if you are long-standing and established viewers of mine, or at least as long-standing as you can be after 10 episodes, although 10 episodes, who knew that was going to happen? Thank you as ever so much for coming back. I really do appreciate it. Those of you who've been following along with the channel may have noticed that there have been a few festive changes afoot. I somewhat foolhardily signed up to Vlogmas this year because, you know, being just 10 episodes in and a matter of months and being somewhat of a vlogging noob, why not take part in a challenge that's designed to run on a sort of frequent, if not daily basis from now up until the 25th of December, I hear you ask. I mean, it feels like the obvious choice, doesn't it? Yep. No. Yes, so in a sort of moment of madness, I decided that Vlogmas 2018 was going to happen. And like I say, I've been podcasting as a whole for just over 2 months, I think, and it definitely feels as though I'm biting off more than I can chew, but if nothing else, it's helping me get in a little bit of practice. It's helping me just think more about the footage that I want to take, and helps me with editing, and so I like to think that it is doing me good in the long run, even if in the short term it's quite full on, but yes. Those of you who have been following along will have noticed that I have been to a couple of Christmas markets so far this month. I can't promise it's all going to be Christmas markets and twinkly lights and hot toddies and beverages, although the latter group may happen more often than some of the others. But I've certainly really enjoyed taking people along as part of those Vlogmas updates. There will be some more regular days. I'll certainly be showing off some of my yarny advent calendars that I have. I'm not going to show them off here on the podcast. I'm going to try and keep the two separate, so hopefully I won't be duplicating too much, if any, of the content that I share. But to those of you who've been leaving messages of support saying how much you're enjoying it, I really do appreciate it. I'm having a huge amount of fun. The great thing about vlogging is it does allow you to be very creative with the editing process and some of the things that you are filming. Not to say that I'm not also equally creative with the with the podcast here, as those of you who watched last week's episode may know. Thank you both for those of you who've been following along on the vlogs, but also thank you for your feedback off the back of last week's episode. I had an awful lot of fun with it. But I do also appreciate your support in terms of those of you that say you really enjoy seeing some of the backdrop here, and just the support generally. I do just want to mention very quickly, and I'm not going to go into detail as I did last week, but I want to make it clear that I'm not apologising for any of these things. I am perfectly happy with the sort of person that I am, the brand that I'm putting out to you guys. It's more a case of just making sure that if there is anyone who's considering signing up, that I'm being very transparent with what I and this podcast are all about, such that we don't get to the point of wasting one another's time when perhaps they decide that it's not for them. Thank you too for your responses to the mention I gave last week to the Knit Now Knitter of the Year Awards, where this podcast, Knitting Vicariously, has been shortlisted in the category of online innovation. You have until the end of this month, so until the end of December, to vote for your favourites across the UK based podcast, vlogging, blogging scenes, and for all that there are shortlisted candidates, there is also a free text field for you to go in and enter whoever your favourite UK-based content creator happens to be. And so if you do have any favourites and you would like to support them, please do consider stopping on by, and I will pop the link down below. Our Blame Dunder Knit Along is continuing apace and runs until the end of January, so if you're still elbow deep in obligation knitting but need something bright and shiny to see you through to the other side, fear not, we are here for you and you have plenty of time left. Perhaps for those of you who have already cast on, you are already well into your first project, in some instances maybe your second or indeed multiple projects. I know there are some of you who are cranking out garments like there is no tomorrow, and as ever we'll be taking a look towards the end of the podcast at some of the projects you've been working on this week. As ever, show notes for this week's episode are going to be available both in the description box below as well as over on Ravelry, where you can find them in the Knitting Vicariously podcast group. You can search for that group by using the Groups tab on Ravelry and join us over there. You can also find show notes over on Instagram by following the Knitting Vicariously Instagram account. As I've mentioned in the past, this is an account that I use for show notes, with each individual post coming for one specific episode, and you can have a look in there and see links and tags for all of the makers mentioned as part of this week's episode. We'll be following our usual gambit this week, where we'll be taking a run through some actual knitting, so what I'm wearing, followed by a few whips. Unfortunately, still no FOs this week. Vlogmas has rather taken its toll on my knitting time, as you will see. But yes, we'll follow that up with some vicarious knitting, including a few acquisitions, as well as taking a look at your Cal projects. But first and foremost, let's have a look at what I'm wearing, and it is a project that I have touted oft on this podcast already, for this is my wonderful No Frills Sweater Mark 1. Yes, I have teased and touted this sweater many times up until now and included it in a couple of little clips and photos throughout some of the episodes, but now I felt it was only fair that I share it with you in person, and isn't it glorious? I love this sweater, so much so that I had to knit a second, although that one at the moment is enjoying a little bit of time out. I'll get onto that momentarily. But yes, this is my No Frills sweater. It's a pattern by Petite Knit, and I will put the original picture up here. It is a really stunning, quite a simple raglan sweater, top down, with the collar included, so no picking up stitches. And yeah, it's a really lovely, simple, straightforward knit. Let me stand up so you can see it in a little bit more detail, although it is fairly straightforward, but I'll stand up nevertheless. What it should allow you to do is appreciate this colour in a little bit more detail, but I will lean down so you can see. So we've got some of the raglan increases here, which are really simple and straightforward. We have, again, as ever, it is on mid-hip length on me, which heaven knows if you can see that, I strongly doubt it. The sleeves are lovely and long, they come just to my knuckles, which is perfect. And the main modification that I made is, it has slightly fewer raglan increases than in the pattern. So the pattern actually has you continue on a little bit further, so it's more of a batwing sort of sleeve shape. But I decided that one, I was a little bit nervous around yardage, and two, that this fit is a little bit more flattering on me and my figure. And I would turn around, but it's very much, the back is the same as the front. So yeah. The main thing to really showcase with this project are the yarns that I used, and one of the key things about the No Frills sweater is that it's written so you can hold fingering weight together with a mohair silk lace yarn as well, and that is what gives it this ridiculous halo and floof. So let me just hold that so you can see, but look at how floofy. So the yarns I used here are both Woolen yarns in her Woolen number 9 colourway, and the bases are Volca, which is her MCN fingering weight, and her Ghost Lace base, which is the mohair silk. And if I hold this really close up, you might even be able to see the sort of texture of holding those two yarns together. It doesn't really kind of look too distinct because these were dyed by the same colour in the same colourway, but it's enough to give it a little bit of depth and a little bit of interest, and so hopefully, there we go, back into focus now. Hopefully you could see that, but I love this sweater. It is so cosy and so soft, and again, I've mentioned in the past, I have a tendency to get a tiny bit irritated with some of the more kind of itchy or rustic or just sort of slightly kind of woolen yarns that you have, and this part of my neck in particular tends to be a little bit sensitive to them, this is fine on me. In fact, having it on my arms in particular, so with jumpers and sweaters I tend to just wear kind of tank tops that run up here, and so I have bare arms that are underneath this. It feels like wearing silk. It's lovely and soft over the top and I absolutely adore it. I think the MCN used as the main fingering base probably helps there as well, but oh, it's gorgeously luxurious. The other thing that made this project so enjoyable to knit is of course the colour itself, and anyone who has watched Kristen's podcast, which is Vine, formerly known as Yarngasm, you will know that not only is Kristen a colour wizard, but also that she has a particular preference for mauve. And I will say that for all that she did a little bit of experimentation before she found her perfect mauve, this it most certainly is. It is mauve perfection. And as someone who was never really convinced that pink was kind of in her colour wheelhouse, if you will, I mean clearly I have a lot of different colours to choose from, but the kind of the dusky pink, if you want to call it that, through to more of a sort of true stranded Aimée grubby pink, for instance, was never really a colourway that had necessarily, not to say it hadn't appealed, but I just didn't necessarily think that I would be able to pull it off. And yet, as soon as I saw it on the screen, I knew that at least some of it had to be mine. And then she mentioned she was going to do it on ghost lace, and the rest just all fell into place. And so I'm so delighted to have this sweater. As I mentioned, I did modify the pattern ever so slightly, so the pattern has you do a certain number of raglan increases. I cast on for the extra large size, which is the one that's closest to my bust measurement and still gives me a little bit of ease in there too. But I was slightly concerned, so I had 3 skeins of each of the MCN base and of the ghost lace, the kid silk mohair, and I was ever so slightly nervous around running out of yarn, and so I decided that I was going to stop the raglan increases and the depth of the armholes slightly higher so that I would make sure that I had a little bit more yardage to play with and get my delightfully long sleeves. But in the end I really needn't have worried. I still had around, I want to say sort of 30 grams of the MCN and maybe around again, so about a third of a skein, so maybe you know, 12-15 grams worth of the kid silk mohair. So I reckon that for an extra large, for someone who, as I say, my bust measurement is not small, to be able to get a full sweater with complete full length sleeves out of it as well, and I will stop showing you, this is a random finger dance all over again, I will say that to get a full sweater out of 2.5-3 skeins of fingering weight, admittedly held with something else, is pretty impressive in my book, and so yeah, really delighted with this sweater. I know some folks have mentioned that they're not particularly happy with mohair, that it doesn't sit well quite literally with them. There are other alternatives out there. I know that there is a number of dyers now who are using the brushed Suri alpaca, including I saw this week that Skein Queen, who is an independent dyer based here in the UK, has got some colourways in that base as well, and so those look beautifully squishy and should be a little bit more kind of sensitive skin friendly, but you can also just knit it, as I say, with a sort of slightly thicker weight fingering yarn or potentially a sport weight yarn to do much the same job. And so that is my no frills sweater. I feel as though I've shown it off so many times on the podcast talking about my second version that I've kind of said a lot of what there is to say about it already, but I thought you would appreciate seeing it here in person. For those of you who are wondering about that second version, it is still on the needles. It's waiting for a convenient spot in time and a convenient place in my freezer, because I have heard the rumour that if you wish to rip back anything that includes kind of mohair as part of it, that putting it in the freezer for a little while beforehand can make that an awful lot easier. So that is my plan. I'm going to pop it into the freezer because, again, in a previous episode I mentioned when it came to joining the second skein of the mohair, I spotted that the colours were quite different from what was in that first skein, which is entirely normal with hand-dyed yarn. I just want to make sure that I'm there for alternating it and making it a little bit of a smoother transition. I was lucky off the back of the fact that I didn't need to alternate with this at all, but obviously I bought the skeins all together in quite a small quantity, so there was a strong chance that either they were dyed together in the same batch, or indeed that Kristen is just ridiculously accurate when it comes to her tonal colour recipes. Because the I Want to Believe is variegated, the chances of it being a close match are obviously a little bit more unlikely, and so I just need to go back and alternate that, and I will do so. But first I think it needs to perhaps chill out, quite literally, a little in the freezer, and hopefully make that a little bit easier to bear. As I mentioned, sadly no FOs this week. I am still trying to bust through some of my projects, as well as having picked up a bit of a languishing whip, and those plus the onslaught of Vlogmas have made my knitting time a little bit thin on the ground in the last few days. I'm hoping that now I'm getting a little bit more practiced with some of the Vlogmas editing, that I can get to working that through a little bit quicker and have some results to show you. But in the meantime, you're going to have to bear with me. There are a couple of things that I'm not going to show in terms of whips this week as well, because while they've seen a little bit of progress, it's really not enough to merit here on the podcast. And so please trust me that I have picked up Widow's Kiss and worked a couple more rounds on that, as well as the kind of ribbed hat that I was working on last week. So Mawson, or a sort of version of Mawson, if you like. That's been my travel knitting. If you've watched Vlogmas, you will have seen that a couple of times, but neither of those have really had enough time and energy put into them to merit showing you them here. But in terms of works in progress that I have been able to put a little bit of time into, the main one of those is living in my psychedelic squirrel project bag from Gemma at the Little Grey Girl. I've shown this in previous weeks. It is one of my new favourites, and I also popped a post up on Instagram, and a lot of you commented it over there, and we're giving it an awful lot of love, and rightly so, because it is excellent. But living in here, although it is busting out at the seams a little bit, so I might need to consider giving it a project bag upgrade at some point, is my Fern and Feather sweater. So let me just hold it up so you can see it properly. This is a wonderful colourwork yoke sweater by Jennifer Steingass, who is Knit Love Wool over on Instagram. It is stunningly beautiful, and I'm delighted to see that a few of you had dropped me a note to say that you were able to take advantage of her pattern sale. I think it might be on for another couple of days still, so if you haven't already done so, I do recommend popping over and checking it out. But I'm so enjoying this knit. Even though I'm through the colourwork yoke part of it, I'm really enjoying putting a bit more time into the body of the sweater. As you can see, I have done a little bit there. But this is knit out of, it's the Plucky Knitter, and it is their Yakpaca base, which is a mixture and a blend of yak and alpaca, and it is so, so squishy. It's amazing. I do look like I'm feeling myself up a little bit. It's not what I'm doing. I'm touching the yarn and squishing the yarn. Although, ladies, gents, and indeed anyone that identifies otherwise, it is important to check. Just be sure whether it's a sweater or not a sweater, ideally without, but just be sure. Anyway, this is such a fun knit. As I mentioned, I have put a little bit more progress into it. This is a progress keeper that I will show you. Just pop it up here for you to enjoy. This is a progress keeper from Hannah, who is the Corner of Craft. And it is my little red Starbucks cup for the festive holiday season. And I'm trying to get it to hold still, but it just won't because it's too jolly. But there you are, you see. So this is a little bit of progress that I've been able to put onto the body of the sweater. Oops, there I am. But probably not quite as much as I would have liked. So there's certainly more on this that I need to go. I've just started the hip increases. There's a few more rounds of those to go. I think I've got another 6 inches or so to do on the body in stockinette, and then a couple of inches worth of ribbing as well. So I'm hoping to power through the body in the next few days, although progress since last week would perhaps suggest that is ambitious. But as I say, the filming some of the vlogs has taken my time, and actually filming them has been fine. The editing part has certainly taken a bit longer, but I feel as though I'm getting faster, which is good. But I'm desperately looking forward to getting back to this knit because this is such a cozy sweater, and I can see how you know, kind of robustly this yarn is going to wear as well. I mentioned the yarn last week. I have this much left of my second skein of the main colour. I didn't mention the colours. The colours are Pinstripe, which is this darker grey, and Going Grey, which is the contrast colour, which is a sort of light stone grey here. The colours I can take 0 credit for, and in fact, the yarn and pattern combination I can take 0 credit for, seeing as I am literally copying my friend Meredith's, who's already knit this sweater in exactly the same yarn and pattern combination, right down to the colourways, because I just, you know, if creativity is dead, if in doubt, just copy someone else. That's what I say. But the yarn I'm using, as I mentioned last week, is a really, really interesting construction of yak and alpaca, and as you can see, it's got a kind of interesting texture to it, a slight halo to it. I mentioned last week to comments of appreciation from a lot of you that it's going to look as though it's already got cat hair on it, which I am on board with, seeing as that is my wardrobe choice. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting yarn to work with, and it is incredibly squishy. And the camera is blowing it out a little bit, but let's see how we go. So that is my Fern and Feather sweater, and that has really been the majority of my knitting this week. And I say knitting because 'tis very much the season. For those of you following along on Vlogmas, you will have noticed that I've got a couple of yarny advent calendars that I'm enjoying opening. One of those in particular that I mentioned on my day 3 vlog is I actually received last year, well, I bought last year a Homespun House's advent calendar, but unfortunately due to a mix-up with my addresses, that didn't arrive until a little bit earlier on this year, and that means that I've been able to essentially acquire a third yarny advent calendar. Now I have gone through, I've peeked in all of the little envelopes, but I genuinely can't remember which colour they're coming and when. So I thought that was a great opportunity to go back to a project I started this time last year, which is my granny stripe crochet blanket. Now, I am not really what I would call a crocheter. I learned how to do some of the very, very basics over on YouTube. I have crocheted a couple of like snowflake ornaments and maybe I think a washcloth or two, but beyond that my skills are limited to non-existent is what I would say. So for those of you who are crochet aficionados, yes, I'm definitely not quite at that level. However, the granny stripe blanket is something that's reasonably straightforward. It is something that's quite easy to pick up and put down, and it is perfect for Advent mini skeins. This time last year I had a kit from Nora George Yarns, and I took great delight in opening up those day by day to the point where I had the first 24 days all crocheted up into this blanket, which I will share with you now. And so this is my granny stripe blanket. It is, let's think, I've got about 36 different mini skeins in here, so it will be around 72 rows worth. If I hold it up, you should be able to see. So yeah, this is it here. So from this, not the chained edge, but the sort of light pink, the first one here, all the way through to the pink, let me just get to it, this pink here. These are all my mini skeins from my Nora George advent calendar last year, and then from there on upwards I just have a few minis, so 12 up into this variegated black here that I have crocheted up over the course of this year, and those were just leftover scraps or minis. Now, the couple that I have added on here, so there is a greeny colour and then a sort of yellowy purpley colour, which you might be able to see there. Those are my new Advent minis from the Homespun House calendar. Although I say new, they are from 2017. new to me this year, let's call it that. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this. I'm not going to unfold it too much because it's pretty wide. So let's do it in half. So in half, it's roughly this. So if I were to stretch it out, it would be kind of from here to here. That's half. I wanted to ensure that I had a blanket that would, if I wished it to, stretch the length or the width rather of a king size bed, which is about 160 centimeters. Not sure what that is in inches, because, you know, imperial and metric, they are not friends. But I will say that resulted in me chaining something like 330 odd stitches, and when you are a complete crochet novice, that's a lot of stitches. I did not think that through. It does mean that I use up a fair whack of the mini skeins, so all the mini skeins I'm using are 20 grams or more if they're scraps, and so they should allow me with those mini skeins to get enough. In fact, let me show you. I have here the ones that I've been working on. So this is from a homespun house. This is day one, but having done my 2 rows, I have about this much left over, which is about enough, I reckon, to put into my Cozy Memories blanket. Yet another blanket that has been languishing in my cupboard. But I will get back to it at some point. So the 20 gram minis are perfect because it's enough for you to be able to get 2 rows done on this and have a little bit left over for those 2. And so yes, I picked this up again earlier this week, keen to get it to a point where I was going to be able to start working up my Homespun House Advent minis. And yeah, as I mentioned, so in terms of what I've done this week, it's really only from, I think, this orangey skein upwards. So I mentioned that up until here are all my Nora George minis from last year. So I did them in order as well in terms of the ones that came out day by day, so I didn't have to worry about colour placement, and that worked out perfectly. But from here on up, there are a couple that I can take you through. So if I scoot forward a minute. So this here is from Stress Knits. This is in her favourite sock base, which is an 80/20, and it is the I Smell Mermaids colourway. It is beautifully kind of bluey green, but with the occasional fleck of a sort of reddish purple in there too. The next one along here is also Stress Knits, and this is her Encouragement colourway on a sparkle sock base, and again you can see that it's predominantly mint green with a few little flecks of red in there too. The next up here is a single ply. It's a beautiful kind of hyacinth blue colourway, and that is a mini skein from, I believe, Martin's Lab. We have a fab kind of yellowy orangey speckle here, which I believe that is another Nora George mini in a mini skein set that I got from her earlier in the year. We have some greens and purples and kind of slight kind of rainbowness in this next one along, and this is a, I'm pretty sure this is a Cyborg's Craft Room. I've spoken about her in the past. She is a fabulous dyer who unfortunately passed away a year or so ago, but I knit a pair of socks, the Kalina socks, out of this colourway, and so was keen to use that again here. The black and white speckle that I have here, I'm pretty sure is a mini skein from a set by a dyer called Lush Knit, and I have a couple of more colours of hers coming up as well. Lush Knit is Megan. She is Lush Knit over on Instagram. She dyes some of the most incredible sock yarns and just variegated tonal brights. She's taking a bit of a break for the moment, but I do urge you to follow her over on Instagram in case she decides to pick up her dyeing apron once again. But yeah, love the little black and white minis there. This next colour is also one of hers. It is a predominantly sort of pinky rose coloured skein with a little fleck of brown and with some kind of chartreusey greens and yellow in there too, and that is her Sweet Thing colourway. And then next up we have this amazing kind of blue with some speckles of purples and pinks in there too, and that is a Hedgehog Fibres in their sock base in the Monet colourway, and I knit a featherweight out of that colour and absolutely love it. I may well show it on here at some point. And then this is another Lush Knit skein. This is her, again, 80/20 base in the Glam Slam colourway, which is just hot neon orange and pinks and all sorts of amazingness. We have another mini skein from Nora George, again in this kind of very, very pale sort of chartreusey green colour, and a mini from Spun Right Round. This was a leftover from my Find Your Fade shawl in the, let me think, Sugar Pop Fizz colorway, that's that one. And then lastly here, this amazing variegated black and very kind of bright colourful neons as well is more Lush Knit in the Where Is My Mind colour, and I have a pair of socks knitted out of that as well. And so there you have it, my granny stripe blanket. So I will be continuing to put a few more rows on this throughout the festive season. I'm aiming to try and make sure that I'm working up my mini skeins each and every day. And given the rows take me probably a little bit over kind of half an hour to get a couple done, I think perhaps a little bit more. It is going to be a little bit of time and a bit of a commitment, but I really enjoy seeing this grow. And I will say, given, you know, I had this much of it done by the end of last Advent, it does grow up fairly quickly, so I'm quite excited to see some of the progress there. But I think, as ever, there's a lot to be said and loved for having, you know, kind of a nice big squishy folded blanket of coziness, and yeah, enjoying working this up. And so that's it for the knitting and the deep crocheting that I've been doing this week. As I say, it's been a little bit of a light one in that sense, but I'm looking forward to perhaps getting a little bit more done in the weeks to come. So moving along into Vicarious Knits, I have opened up a thread for this month's Show Us Your Vicarious Knits over on Ravelry. This is an opportunity for you to go in and perhaps draw attention to and share your enthusiasm for patterns, designs, publications or yarns that you are really excited about, that have really caught your attention, but perhaps for whatever reason you're not just going to get to work up anytime soon. And you know, unlike the Cal, where it's something that you really want to kind of go out and do there and then, this is something that perhaps is a little bit more far-fetched, or maybe just one for not right now. But in my post on there, I mentioned a couple of colourwork hat patterns that I'd been seeing doing the rounds, and whether it's a sort of hangover from the cardamom coffee hat that I was working on, or whether it's just that the world and its wife has genuinely gone mad for colourwork hats at the moment, I am here for it, is all I'm saying. So I know that Kate Davies, in collaboration with a number of different designers, has just announced and launched a new hat book, which looks stunning. The patterns that I was thinking of in particular are all two-colour colourwork patterns, which is perhaps a little bit more manageable, but also just leaves for quite a lot of flexibility in choosing colours. And it just so happens that over the weekend, as I will have shown you in the vlog if you watched the Vlogmas episode, I popped over to Bath to visit the Christmas market. It was very busy, but while I was there I was able to take a few minutes to out of the crowds to go and visit a yarn story. Now, a yarn story is a fabulous local yarn store over in Bath. It's in a beautiful part of the city and they have a really exceptional range of yarns there. So if you're looking to go and see perhaps some Fibre Company or some Walcott yarns, they have a great range of those, but they also happen to be stockists of some of the harder to get yarns like House of a la Mode, like La Bien-Aimée, like Primrose for instance. So they've got a fabulous selection and I would totally recommend you stopping by. And so stop by I did, and while I was there were a couple of combinations that caught my eye and I couldn't resist. Now, the first of those, I'm not normally much of a one for a kind of proper brick orangey colour, but there was something about this combination that just left it kind of inevitable. And so these are both House of a la Mode. Let me turn it around so you can see. So these are both House of a la Mode. They are both on her House fingering weight base. So this is fingering weight and it is an 80-20, 80% merino, superwash merino and 20% nylon. But these colours together just made my heart sing. So let me hold them a little bit closer so you can see. Right? I mean, come on now. So the top one here, this is Chestnut, and the bottom one is Observatory. And so if I show you some of the colours in Observatory, if I show you those a little better, you will see why this pairing was just inevitable. It's beautiful. Yeah, these had to happen together. Had to happen together. So love these two together. In terms of yardage, you get 400 yards to 100 grams. And yeah, it's a really lovely, soft and squishy sort of base. So these two are definitely going to be used together. I could see them working up really nicely in something like the Bloom hat, which I will put up here on the screen, and that is a hat by the High Fibre Shop, which is a local yarn shop based here in the UK, designed for 4-ply weight yarn, so those could look really fabulous knit up as that, or indeed a myriad of the other fingering weight colourwork hat patterns that are out there at the moment. But yeah, I love these two. And then I had a little bit of a yarn-fueled mental abstraction while I was in the shop. So I had convinced myself that I had never bought nor owned any La Bien-Aimée. I realised subsequently that actually I do have a skein, and I bought it from a yarn story at an event they did back in London a couple of years ago. But that aside, I had used that as justification to purchase a couple of skeins. And do you know what? I'm not even sorry about it, because look, seriously, these are absolutely amazing together. So, I mean, just look at the greens, and I mean, this green alone is exceptional, but when you pair it with this skein on the bottom here and the speckles that it has, it just, ugh, together, I can't stop it, just really, no. Yeah, these are absolutely divine. So they are both Merino Sport, so they're both sport weight skeins, and they are 100% Merino. You get round about 355 yards or 325 meters to the skein, and yeah, they are as soft and as squishy and as delicious as you would expect them to be in terms of the colorways. This top one here, the green, is Porter, and the speckled goodness is Peerie Veau. And oh, just though, for reals, how could I possibly resist these? And again, sport weights, I reckon there are a myriad of options there. I could choose to do either a fingering weight hat and have it be a little bit larger on the side, or even potentially a DK weight hat with an extra repeat or two thrown in for good measure. So they are very, very forgiving when it comes to both the yardage but also the way in which they can be used. And I just, if I were being a true yarn glutton, which as you can see I am not much, I would have considered purchasing a few more skeins of the Porter to be able to make a sweater, but yeah, no, hat's fine, it's fine. Would look amazing as a sweater though. No, shit, Caroline, stop this. Right, stop the madness. Colourwork hat, that's what these are going to be for. They're going to be for a hat. It's fine. And then, so yeah, I have absolutely no regrets, no apologies necessary, just pure delight. And so yes, those are my yarny acquisitions this week and all of my vicarious knitting that I've been doing whilst staring at these fabulous skeins. But I'm delighted to say that between you, you have been able to make so much more progress this week than I have, and I'm delighted for it. And so as ever, I want to take the opportunity to have a look at some of the things that you've been working on as part of our Blamed Under Knit Along, the CAL that allows you, and indeed compels you, to go forth and work on the things that you've been dying to do. And so as ever, let's take a look at some of the projects that you have in store for us this week. This is an Instagram week, so we're going to be using some of the pictures that have popped up using the Blamed Under Knit Along hashtag, and as ever, I hope you enjoy. the enablement all the time. That's what this cal is all about. I mean, technically it's also supposed to bring you like joy and, you know, finished objects and all that kind of fun stuff, yada yada. But actually it's like 90% just, oh my Christ, that's amazing, I want to knit that. Oh dear. And so thank you for basically fueling my continued vicarious gluttony, I think, for want of a better expression, and I'm delighted that you were able to take part and to join us both in the knit along and to those of you that did pop up in this week's calorie. But yes, I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who is knitting along and enjoying themselves with it. As ever, I'm very, very grateful to those of you who are over in the Ravelry thread. You can have a look at that Ravelry thread and be thoroughly enabled just by visiting us over in the Knitting Vicariously group, which you can find by searching for Knitting Vicariously over in the Groups tab on Ravelry. Likewise, we are always over on Instagram too, between the Knitting Vicariously hashtag for all things podcast related and the BLAMEDUNDERKNITALONG hashtag specifically for the CAL projects. But that is pretty much it for this week. I'm conscious it's been a shorter one this time round, partly due to a little bit less knitting content than usual and partly due to I feel like I'm just spamming you lot at the moment with the constant updates and the vlogs, and so, you know, I don't want to take up all of your time in this week. So it only really remains for me to wish you a very, very wonderful rest of day, rest of week, and I hope your knitting is keeping you happy and fulfilled. But if for whatever reason it isn't, I hope you get a chance to knit vicariously. Keep on keeping on, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye. And so deliciously squishy at no, I oh, I just caught sight of myself doing that and it just looks dodgy. Oh dear. Rest assured, it is 100% the jumper. Well, 90% the jumper. And just while I'm being a complete and utter juvenile, can I talk about the fact that when you do start knitting this, there is absolutely a point where your colourwork is going to look like a phallus. In my book, you're not human if you don't take a picture of it on your phone and have a little chuckle to yourself about the fact you're knitting a penis colourwork sweater. I'm just saying. Oh no, my chestnut has come untwisted. I have been loving it too hard. That'll do. It's a little bit on the limp side. No one likes a limp skein. Oh, that's what she said. I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist. Bam chicka wah wah. Pure porn. Seriously though. It's just porn. Ugh. Oh yeah. That's the good stuff. Ugh. This is like ASMR but with yarn, which frankly is a combination I'm not sad about. This is the only like close to X-rated knitting podcast you're ever gonna see, and it's totally inadvertent. That's the sad part.